Hello, this is part 56 of Airbnb clone Ruby on Rails series, and in last video we started integrating Stripe payments and we used Stripe elements to show this UI. Now what we want to do is, once the user has submitted details and click on submit, we want to make a Stripe payment, right? So for that, let's go to Stripe documentation first and see how it works. I have some idea. I think there is some payment intent, then there is customer payouts. So let's have a look at the reference. Core resources, balance, we can check the balance, we don't need that. Charges, nope, we don't need that. Customer we will need, we will create customers. Customer session is not important for us, we have our own customer. Disputes, events, files, payment intent. Yeah, a payment intent, let me increase this size, is basically guides us through the process of collecting payment from the customer. So we will need this, and if I am correct, ID, amount, payment methods, client secret, currency, customer. It can be null, but it depends upon customer, it can be null. Okay, and setup events, payouts object is created when you receive funds from Stripe or when you initiate a payout to either a bank account or a debit account. Okay, we don't need that. Refunds, we won't implement that. You can implement it, but we won't implement that. And what are tokens? Okay, tokenization is for collecting sensitive information. Okay, we'll see that. So I think the first step should be to create customer. And to create a customer, we can go to here, this create a customer section, address, description, email. I think we will just use email and name. Phone number we are not using in our database, so why should we share it here? I think name and email should be sufficient. So let me check. This is all Ruby. We won't use any other code, we will use Ruby code, right? So that means we have to connect it to some Ruby controller. So let's do one thing. Let's create a new controller, new file, booking payments controller.rb. Class application. This is the same thing that we have done like a million times, not exactly million, but yeah, still. And we will need create, because we will be creating the payment here, right? So let's do this. For this we will again need to create a route to connect our view to this controller correctly. So for that we can go to config, routes, and do resources, booking payments, and it will have create. For now, I'm not sure if we will need something else in future. Let's check this route first. Rails routes dash C booking payments. Do we have anything? We have booking payments, controller name, and create. Controller name is booking payments, and we have create. Great. So using booking payments route, we can send information here. What information we would want to send? Basically all the booking related details, like the user ID, the card related information. I'm not sure if we will send it or do it in some other way. Dates, check-in and check-out date, then these pricing and all. Okay, we have to send pricing also, because first of all it's secure. and second, we might change pricing in future, so we don't want to rely on those kind of things. And we have to deduct this much amount using Stripe also. So we can do this from this, but let me think. Before we do that, let me check one thing. Fake Stripe cards. Okay, we have these cards 42424242 and this. Let's try this and see what happens. Inspect, console, clear. 4242424242 and 26. Some future date here. 123 and submit payment. Okay. Expired API key. Why is it expired? Let me restart my server. Bin/dev. Okay, it did work. Nope, there's nothing. Basically, the issue is that we passed this root path, right? So it is just mentioning that we don't have a post method for a root path and all. So we do have a booking controller, right? So let's do that. Let's find that. Rails route bookings payment, booking payments path. Let's go to code and let's submit path like this. Booking payments, and in this I think this will need to be in a bracket. Now in this booking payments, we can send data along with it, right? Because it's a post method, we can send data. So for now, I just want to send property ID and check whether it's going there or not. Property underscore ID. And how can we use property ID? Property dot ID. And what I'll do is I'll write raise here. Let's refresh. Continue. Nope. Refresh. Okay, the path is incorrect. We will have to mention underscore path. Let's try this. And we went till raise. So the connection with our controller was successful. We just want to log this, right? So it will be part of params, right? So params authenticity token, Stripe token. Okay, so I thought it would work. Whenever we send any card in our front end, which we did just right now, our Stripe element will create a Stripe token. This is important because this will get used in future in a lot of things. This is Stripe token, okay? And we have our property ID which we passed. So let's do one thing. Let's pass other things also. Let's pass user ID we can do current current user dot id. We can pass check-in date, which should be at that check-in date. Checkout date at that checkout date. Then we need payment details. What all payment details we are taking from user? We have service fee, base fare, and total amount. So base fare, service fee, and total amount. We have passed all these things. Let's see. Let's do that same process again. Refresh. Let's reduce size here. Let's use our fake card. We can use this because we are in test mode right now. What all things we have? Let's use params. Let me increase size here. We have Stripe token, base fare, check-in date, checkout date, property ID, service fee, total amount, user ID. I think that's all we need. If we will need anything else, we will get that later on. So just a bit. Sorry. So let's do same thing which we used to do. Create a private method, name it as it's booking, payments, params. We'll first have to verify that all our params are available. Let's do it quickly. Property ID followed by user ID, check-in date, checkout date, user ID, property ID, check-in date, check it out, base fare, service fee, total amount. Base fare, service fee, let's break it in multiple lines just for visibility. Service fee and total amount. And we need one more thing, which is Stripe token. Let's copy this and use it at top. Now once we have this Stripe amount, we will have to create this customer also. So we'll have to do two things. We can create customer like this and we can retrieve it like this. But what is this? I think this is customer ID. Yes, it has mentioned CUS underscore, right? So what we will do is we'll save this customer ID to our database, because if we are just passing customer ID and we can retrieve the customer, we'll create customer once for this particular user. We'll save that customer ID in our database, and whenever we want to retrieve it, we'll just use this. So this is something that we can do. Let's try this. So to do this, we will have to add one column in our database. I'll do this in users table. Rails G generate migration. Yes, Rails G migration. Add Stripe customer ID to users. Stripe customer ID, it will be a string. Let's enter, check our migration file. Where is it? Database, migrate, users stripe customer ID, and it's a string and it can be null, right? Null, true. Okay, let's not add this. If we'll need this later on, we will do that. Let's do the migration. Rails db migrate. Great. Let's stop our server, restart this. Now we need a way to create a new customer, and once that customer gets created, we have to save it in our database, and if that customer already exists, we have to fetch it from our database. So what we can do is, we can first fetch our user. This is our user, okay, our local user. So for that, we can use user equals to user.find user ID, params user ID. We can do the same thing for property also. We will need that later on. Property ID, property, all these are private methods, okay? I'm getting a call. Let me silent this. Property and property. Let's first check whether we are able to call it correctly or not. Refresh. Reduce size, but I will have to again increase size. That's 2, not 1 2 4 2 4 2 4 2 4 2 4 2 4 2 4 2 4 2. Let's get user, enter, and we can get the user property, property. Let's enter, and we can get the property also. So let's exit it. Okay, there should not be any exit here, no worries. Let's go back. We can use memoization also here. Property will fetch only once, but user we might fetch twice, because we will update the user once we have created a customer also. So I think it works like this. Yeah, it works like this only. So what happens in memoization is that, for example, we call this user, let's say, twice. So if we use this regular code, what it will do is, for first time, it will make this transaction in our database and find this user. When we call this function second time, it will again make this transaction in the database and do the second call basically. So each time we call this user, it will do this transaction. But if we use memoization, it's sort of, you can think of it as memory saving or caching, those kind of things, where if this value exists and it has been saved to user variable, the next time when we call this, it won't fetch from database, it will directly return this, because it already remembers who this user is. So that's what memoization is. Okay, so we'll see if we'll need this for property also or not. And what we can do is, let me do this in alphabetical order only. Definition stripe customer, and let's fetch stripe customer also, we can do this using this. But we need correct ID here. So for that we can use user, and we'll use memoization here also. But there is one problem. This ID can be null. The latest value which we added in our database, let's go to our schema to show it correctly. Users, the latest thing which is stripe customer ID, it can be null, right? So if it can be null, we will have to check whether it is null or not. So user dot stripe customer ID dot nil. If this is nil, then create a customer, else retrieve retrieve the customer. Let's try this. So in either case we will have to use memoization. So what we can do is we'll cut this, paste it here, cut this, retrieve customer, let's do that, and we can pass an ID as user dot stripe customer ID. Okay, now let's create a customer if it is null. So create a customer, for that we need something like this. Let's do that. But instead of name we will use user dot name, and instead of email we will use user dot email. Let me check what all other information we have. I think we have this much only. Do we have name? I'm not fully sure. Users, email, name is there, city and state and country. Let me check. We can send it as metadata, but you can do that if you want to. Phone number we don't have, so it's fine. Let me reduce size to explain this. Okay. How it will work is, whenever this function gets called, it will check if the stripe user ID in our user table is nil or not. If it is nil, it will create a new user and return that. If it is not nil, it will retrieve a user. But there is one problem here. The problem is we have created a new user. From that we'll get the customer ID also, which is this. But have we saved it to our user table? No. So let me get this customer first, and user dot update stripe customer ID should be customer dot ID, and once that gets done, then we can return this customer. This is how it will work. Assume there is a fresh user. They will call this, for example. They will go to their user database. They will find that their stripe ID is nil. So they will go to else case and they will generate a, sorry. So because it is nil, it will go. They will go to this if case, create a new customer using their name and email. Once that new customer gets created, we will update our user table and add the stripe customer ID which we have received right now, and then we will retrieve this customer, which is the purpose of this function, which is they want the customer. Second time when they again come, they will see that, oh, user ID is already available. User already has a stripe customer ID. So they will go to else case and retrieve that customer. How can they retrieve that customer? Using their stripe customer ID. Okay. So this way our database will have information about our Stripe customers. At the same time, Stripe will have information about our users using their emails. Okay. So I think this should work. We have written all these functions. We have already tested user. We have already tested property. Let's test Stripe customer. So for that, what I'll do is refresh. I'll definitely have to increase size 4 to 4 to 4 to 4 to 4 to 4. Submit payment. Let's find our user first, and if we check this user, it was updated, I don't know when, country, state, city. Our Stripe customer ID is nil. So at this point, let's call Stripe customer. Notice that as soon as we call this, it will trigger this entire code and mainly Stripe this code first. So let's call this, and it has given us this customer ID which ends with 52UN. Customer nil, this, test email ID is mentioned. And now what we will do is, it is at the bottom. I don't want that. Because in YouTube video it will get cut down a bit. Now let's fetch user, because it must have been updated, right? So let's fetch user, and they have a Stripe customer ID with 52UN, and let's fetch Stripe customer, and we were able to fetch this same user correctly. So we have already crossed 26 minutes, and I think I've explained a lot in this video. So what I will do is I'll summarize this first, and then we'll move on to payments and all. So let's quickly see what we have done. Okay. To create a Stripe payment, we need a Stripe customer first. To create a customer, we are writing that code in Ruby controller. So because we have to write the Stripe code in Ruby. So what we did was we created a route using which we can access this booking payments controller. Once we are able to access that controller, when we click on submit, we are sending all the required information, all the important information important information to our controller, which is property ID, user ID, check-in date, checkout date, fare, base fare, service fare, total amount. Once we have sent there, all these details are sent there, we are fetching our property and we are fetching our user, and we are doing memorization also. Now we want to fetch the customer first, because each customer will be unique on our data, on our Stripe database also. So what I want to do is I want to add a Stripe customer ID in our user. We did that migration also. We added a Stripe customer ID in our user, which can be empty also, or which can be nil also. Now when we fetch the user, using this user, we will check whether our Stripe customer ID is available or not. If it is not available, if it is nil, we'll create a new user, update our local user, and return that customer as a Stripe customer. Second case, if Stripe user ID is available, in that case we will retrieve it from our Stripe and return it as a Stripe customer. Once we have this Stripe customer, what we will do is next video is that we can use that information to create payments. Payment intent. You just have to write something like this: create a payment. The amount, the currency, which is USD. Automatic payment method, we'll see what we have to do here, and we will also pass in the customer ID. That's it. So a lot of work has been done. We will have to save this information in our local database also. Once this payment gets done, we will save it in our local database also. I like to keep payment related details. If there's duplicacy, it's fine. That's it. So thanks a lot for this. I hope it is clear. If it is not clear, do let me know. I'll focus on what parts you are not clear about, and maybe recreate this video again. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.